everyone, and welcome to yet another disclosure in the media. I'm here with Ryan Pollenkarts again for another discussion on Elder Scrolls. This is an interesting one. This is about the Argonians and the relationship to the Hist. I find this very fascinating. I'll let him explain, but then there's some real alien disclosure in that I've discovered myself. So,
Hello there. Today we're talking about the Hist. And the Hist, as we've talked about a little bit in the past, are the sentient trees of the Argonian homeland of Black Marsh. Now, these trees sort of resemble the baobab tree of African African, like Africa, and their baobab trees play a role in African mythology as these trees play a role in Argonian mythology, though the rest of most of Argonian stuff kind of seems Mesoamerican in origin and theming. The Hist trees just happen to look like baobab trees with proper foliage on them. So this is a Hist birthing pool that we're seeing in this first image, and I will explain that here in a second. But this large tree with the sort of reddish glowing flowering pods off of it is the Hist itself. Underneath that golden liquid is Hist sap, which is an important role in the development of an Argonian. So basically, Argonians lay their eggs in these sort of pools, and around the Hist, and the baby Argonians go to the Hist sap and will ingest it, and that will give them a connection to the Hist tree and a mental connection to that tree, which will then, the tree will then guide it back to its actual original parents. Also, the trees hold that mental connection with them for the rest of their lives and will guide the Argonians' genetic body and how they're made up and what they look like, essentially, for what the tree is going to essentially use that Argonian for best. Now, these trees are also extremely interesting because they have a subterranean root network that crosses all of Black Marsh, and all these trees can interconnect and have a hive consciousness, essentially. So the Hist consciousness shapes the Argonians, and the Argonians take care of the Hist, and the Hist take care of the Argonians. We'll show a bit of that relationship throughout history as time goes on, including the fact that even in some cases, when the Dunmer of Morrowind, the Dark Elves, would take the Argonians as their slaves, in some cases, the more benevolent Argonian faction, Dunmeri factions, would uproot Hist trees and bring them with them, so the Argonians still had that connection, and also so that they could continue to make not feral slaves subsequent generations. So yeah, this is the Hist tree. This is one of the birthing pools around it. So the baby Argonian eggs would be over here, and then they would crawl, sort of like sea turtles, crawl back to the sea, to the sap, and it would ingest it. It's also implied that Argonian mothers breast milk, because they do have breasts like other human races, at least the ones that were shaped by the Hist. Their breast milk has Hist sap in it. And that if there's no way that a baby Argonian can ingest Hist sap, there is a chance that if the mother can nurse it and had Hist sap recently, she can pass the sap's qualities along to her young in her breast milk. Because Argonians not only at birth will ingest Hist sap, they will continue to go back and have it from time to time in a ritualistic sense. It can re-strengthen their connection to the trees. It can give them connection to different Hist trees. And it's just also like a ritual act that they do sort of at different stages of their life when they feel that they need a change. Here you see the cracks in the Hist tree's bark is where the sap runs out of, and this Argonian, I guess you'd call him a shaman, is collecting the sap to use as a sort of vision inducing drug, because that is what it can do in large doses and in any dose, basically, to non-Argonians. It is a potent hallucinogenic and psychoactive chemical to non-Argonians, and if taken in large amounts, Argonians are also susceptible to this, which is interesting because Argonians even just intrinsically are sort of resistant to drugs, disease, and poisons, and still in high doses, very high doses, they still succumb to it. Whereas with normal things, they can ingest it like it's nothing. So yeah, here we're seeing this is a community of Argonians during the Second Era, during the Ebonheart Pact, in Morrowind, and they have a small Hist tree in the center of their small village. Now, most likely, these Argonians were part of a slave community during the prior periods before the Ebonheart Pact, but the Ebonheart Pact kind of reset the slavery system for a bit, and all Argonian slaves in Morrowind were freed, and then after the Pact, the slavery began again. Most likely, this community was a slave community that had its tree, but now that the Pact is there, now they can have a more prosperous small town, as before they were basically a labor camp in the service of one of the Dunmerry great houses. So here we're seeing the Blackwood Company's Hist tree set up during the Third Era, during the events of the Oblivion Crisis. If you play through Oblivion, you will run into this during the Fighters Guild questline. That the Blackwood Company is a rival mercenary guild that is operating in southern Cyrodiil and is poaching the Fighters Guild's good contracts. And they seem to do so in very mysterious ways, and the Blackwood Company is known for being mostly Argonians, with a few other races, mostly Khajiit and Argonians, however, and that their warriors kind of are in like battle trances at times, and it's found out that they're using Hist sap to send them into almost berserker rages like you would have from berserkers in Old Norse tales, where they would take a psychoactive mushroom in the Old Norse belief, well, what archaeologists believe and historians believe, that berserkers in the Old Norse times would have taken a psychoactive mushroom and would go into a berserker rage. They are taking Hist sap in large quantities, going into a berserker rage and kind of just killing everything in sight. And when you're kind of an undercover agent, you go do that, and you think you're killing goblins in a town, but realistically, you're actually slaughtering an entire town of people, because in your vision, you're viewing them as goblins, but they're not fighting back, which is strange for goblins, but you're just like slaughtering them, and then when you come to, you figure out that you're their goblins, and the Blackwood Company knew that you were a plant from the Fighters Guild, and this is when you go back to get your revenge on them, and with the Fighters Guild, and you destroy their Hist tree setup. And also, having Hist tree sap in most of the rest of the Empire that's not in Argonia Black Marsh itself is highly illegal. It's like having skooma or any other very strong, potent illegal compound, because of its dangerous qualities and the fact that the Hist trees have this view outside of Black Marsh as an inherently evil thing, because they're sentient, but they don't view, like, they have their own aims, and they work against basically anyone that they kind of don't work for. Mm-hmm. In the past, historically, the Argonian military has the Argonians themselves as a people, but the Argonian military especially, have benefited greatly from the connection with the Hist. Now, how you would ask this is that the Hists don't only exist in Tamriel. They also their home realm is somewhere in Oblivion. It's unclear as to how they first arrived in Tamriel, but they've been here since before since basically when the world was created. They have at times given information to the Argonians that they have been able to pick up from either are their connections in Oblivion itself, or the fact that there's traveling Argonians that have a mental connection with a history, and then anything that Argonian has in his brain can go back to the history because that mental connection. So then that history, that any Argonian that has that mental connection, that history can send the same information back out.
Hmm.
It's not like it's like a telepathic thing between the tree and the individual Argonian, but the tree can like disseminate information to the entire
Like a miniature Akashic record, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like having sort of a closed network space where you have one machine, you put something into it, it goes to that, it comes back down on another machine on the same network.
Okay, like an little internet type of thing.
Basically, and in the case of the Oblivion Crisis, the histories were able to warn the Argonians that there were Oblivion portals going to be opened where, when, and however, and that's either due to the fact that on Oblivion's side, the trees were getting the information from the realms of Oblivion and were passing it to the Argonians, or there were Argonians in the Mythic Dawn that passively gave the information to the histories, and the histories passed it on to the rest of the Argonians. This put the Argonians in a very powerful position when going in to the Fourth Era, because where in sort of the same sort of way that America benefited from World War II, that we were the only ones that weren't ravaged by the war and had to rebuild our cities, the Argonians didn't either. And they used this now extremely powerful position to invade their neighbors to the north, the Dunmer in Morrowind, and get revenge for the centuries of enslavement, hunting, and prejudice. And they took much of the southern part of Morrowind, and the noble house that was like responsible as the biggest slavers, they basically wiped them out. And so much to the fact that now that house is no longer a noble house, and a new house has taken their place in Morrowind because they just can't sustain like being part of running the government in Morrowind anymore. The Argonians in the Fourth Era are doing very well. They still hold much of what was Southern Morrowind, and now is just like a new territory within the Kingdom of Argonia. And they've kind of only kept to that. They have no real connection to the Empire anymore, but they don't have any like ill connection with them either. There's some implications that Argonia does have some rub with the Thalmor and the Eldmeri Dominion, because the Eldmeri Dominion wanted to use ports along the outer areas and cities along the outer areas of Black Marsh for their own gains. But ultimately, the Argonian lords and probably the Hist do not agree with that, because the Thalmor usually bring trouble wherever they go. These reports are really skint. There's not too much definitive stuff on them. I mentioned them only because they're brought up a couple times in passive conversation. So now we'll talk about some of the weird otherworldly stuff about the Hist. So this is Umbriel. This is a cleaved off portion of Clavicus Vile's realm of Oblivion. This area was a floating island that entered the mortal plains of Mundus and came off the east coast of Tamriel over and basically all the way to the center to the Imperial City and was like hovering above it at one point, and it was threatening the city. A hero who is connected to the Mede dynasty in the early Fourth Era is when this takes place, so just after the Oblivion Crisis. I think it's about 30 years after the Oblivion Crisis, so 170-ish years before Skyrim. This young Mede prince and a band of adventurers that he worked with were able to deal with the issue, and the island went back to Oblivion. However, because there were so many Hist trees on said island from Oblivion initially that had connected with the Hist on Tamriel, Um, in fact, one of the members of this party of heroes was an Argonian who, when defeated in battle, reawoke on the island because the Hist basically sent him there. Was able to connect to both, and then the different groups of Hist were able to connect. And when the island was returned to Oblivion, the Hist brought it to their pocket realm of Oblivion, which they have. They have their own pocket realm of Oblivion. We don't know much about it. In fact, in no game have we gotten to it, and all we know is that they have one, and we don't know what it's like or any of that. We just know that there is a Hist realm of Oblivion, and that Umbriel went to this realm, and that was the last of that. Now, connected to Umbriel, we need to talk about the sleeping tree in Skyrim. So in Skyrim, there's in the Whiterun Plains, close to Rorikstead, you can find this glowing purple tree with a purple liquid underneath and a tap on the side. And it's a small tree, and it's not Hist-like per se. However, it has sap that does things that are psychoactive. In game, it gives you a very similar effect to skooma. With mods that add like drug effects into Skyrim, it gives you an effect very similar to red belly skooma. It is can be sold for great. The sap from the sleeping tree in Skyrim can be sold for a very large sum of gold if you know who to sell it to. In fact, some skooma sellers and drug dealers within Skyrim that you can meet also sell sleeping tree sap as well. But this tree is believed to either be a seedling or sapling form of a Hist tree that, due to the climate of Skyrim, can't really like take proper root and has entered this weird dormant state, hence the sleeping tree name. Or that the seed from it came off of Umbriel like the 170 years prior, or that it is also some kind of Oblivion-based tree that came in off Umbriel at another but isn't per se a Hist tree. But it's strange because it has very similar qualities to the Hist tree except for its look. And even though it's not this amber-colored like golden liquid, it's a purple liquid that has very similar properties, and I'm inclined to believe it's not per se a history unless it's some kind of dormant history that, due to the climate of Skyrim, can't properly take root. There's not much else to do with it in game. I mention it because it's kind of this lore debate that's been going on ever since Skyrim has come out. No definitive answers from the developers as to it. It does glow like the Hist trees do. It just has a faint purple glow. Finally, and almost certainly and interestingly, when I said that that Argonians that are not exposed to the Hist in their basically infant stage are feral, it is implied that the enemies that you can find in Elder Scrolls 1 and 2 called lizard men are an offshoot of the Argonian race or the original beings that the Argonians are descended from. And that these beings have not ingested Hist sap and thus are a more animalistic, hunched over with a more mace-like tail, beast race that's sort of the goblin equivalent to an Argonian, as they have tool use. As you can see here, he's got a shield and what appears to be some kind of axe, and they are an enemy type in Daggerfall and Arena, but they're not present in later games. The last time they were in an Elder Scrolls game is that, but lore people talk about how there are Argonians that likely were never exposed to the Hist sap, and the Hist weren't able to kind of reform them into this more humanoid state that could allow them to actually like act as a sentient race. So instead, now they're just these animalistic beasts, and they don't have the capacity to speak. They're basically like a raptor that's been given tools. Yeah, so that's kind of all I have to say about the Hist today. I mean, there's other things that we could say about the Hist, like the fact that um, their mental connection seems to mostly serve the Hist, and that it's also and that this is one of the reasons why the Argonians view the Hist as giving them their soul, because without the Hist connection, there's something like this animalistic form, whereas with their um, connection to the Hist, quite they're just as intelligent as any other race. So that's probably where this idea that the Hist give an Argonian their soul comes from initially.
Yeah, this is actually quite interesting. Where do I begin, though? You have, um, where they send the island back. What I was kind of seeing when they sent the island back to their own pocket realm of oblivion, it's no different. There's a sequence in Star Trek Discovery where there's this quantum entanglement that pulls them into a future time frame, and this is based on frequencies whereas there was this entanglement was always going to pull them into the 32nd century, this one set of coordinates, no matter what was going on in that time frame, it was always linked to there. And what and that pulls the ship in its entirety later on, from Kirk's time frame or Pike's time frame. So what happens is with this, it's a frequencies game where you have a certain dialed set of frequencies here and another set of dialed frequencies here, and you could literally like if you tell this frequency to act like this one, it automatically goes here, or vice versa. And that's how ships travel. That's how portals and cords and everything form and open. That's the basis of that physics. So with this, it's the same thing. If you re-dial and say no, send to this frequency instead, you could literally pull a whole island in. You could pull a whole planet in. You could pull a whole universe in if you wanted to, into a different part of the multiverse in that same sense. Now with the Hist itself, I find this interesting because years ago I ran into a race that they called themselves Triforms. Now, this may sound weird because it seems to be only two parts. I feel the third component is more of a realm, like the Hist realm of Oblivion. At least that's what I feel, and I'm getting validation even as I'm talking about this. But there was this mist-like form that was kind of this green ectoplasmic type of consciousness, kind of like a plant or dryad or naiadic type of form, like representing a particular, like overall, not necessarily just conceptual form, but aspect of nature. That would be a naiad. A dryad would be an individual, like mother father tree or something of that nature, like a larger one that would govern like a whole area. And then you have the earth basically controlling all these other trees that don't always have their individual consciousnesses, but they're linked to a larger network of trees. Mushrooms are the same way, where it's like the literal version of the World Wide Web. That's how mushrooms are, and some mushrooms and fungi are interlinked. That's also they do that in Discovery with the mycelial network, where they travel from anywhere to any place. It's essentially a bunch of string of mushrooms. It's the same difference in Discovery. Yeah. Well, you have the Hist, where these triform aliens. There was a physical component as well. They looked kind of like a Ferengi from Star Trek, but they said they were more of a primate species. They had like some lizard in them, but they were more of a primate. And they had a large head like a Ferengi and had the large ears like a Ferengi. They kind of had resembled more of a cow face rather than a monkey or a primate, but or a lizard. But they said that was their genetic makeup. What happened is it's like in the show Futurama, where they give that monkey that hat and then all of a sudden he's super intelligent, sort of deal. It was like this, where this dryadic force or this naiadic type nature force interlinked and interwove into this primate lizard race. That was eventually they did have kind of an Argonian appearance in the face or in the jawline a little bit, but they were shorter, and they linked into this, which made them more enlightened, more intelligent. It's the same as like with the Argonians, and the relationship was they revered this triform energy, and the reason they called it a triform is you had this overall World Wide Web type of interlink where it did that did quantumly entangle all of them and send information, all of them, like with the Argonians, and even states of being, like with the feral draconian version versus the more intelligent version. Like that monkey in Futurama with the hat, and then they smashed the hat, and he was only half intelligent. That's a weird example, but it's still there. With this though, they said they would have been more primitive, instinctual life forms that that would have been exactly like this. Now you have the dryadic or naiadic force, nature force. You have the physical primate lizards themselves, and you have the realm by which that energy came from, and that hence tri form. So it's essentially the same dynamic. And what's very interesting is these. I first encountered these guys in Nebraska, and we eventually found out what their name was when we came to Arizona originally in Prescott. And there was this being that I'd gotten a picture of. If I can find the picture, it will be in this video. If not, I'm describing it here. There was this paranormal picture I got on my full spectrum camera of one of these triform life forms, and he was in a mirror that we have. It's a dream catcher mirror. Wonderful thing. You don't have to guard this mirror. It captures things as it comes through. You can have it. Oh, you can have it open. You don't have to cover it, salt it, none of these things, or put silver, none of it, because it's in this this dream catcher form. Well, this triform life form, I saw him standing on the other side of the mirror in the picture, and he actually got stuck in the mirror, and he came to Arizona with us. He said he was part corporeal, part incorporeal because of the nature of the triform relationship, and he came in, and also uh, other life forms that were the same relationship to them but larger. These were elemental type, bigger, muscular versions of them that could take the forms of like shadow people and such. And these were more warrior like ones. The one that was in the mirror was more of a shorter monkey sized one, like a marmoset or something like that. But these bigger ones, these bigger ones were more like guards of like the Hist. Let's just say like you have the pictures of the Argonians guarding the history.
Mhm.
The bigger
Yeah.
guys were the guards of an entrance to the triform realm, kind of like you have Anubis guarding and dogmen guarding portals, or Anakim or Sasquatch forest people guarding portals. Same difference with these bigger guys. The bigger guys had almost militaristic like ranking names. Like I ran into one by the name of Linktar Delta one time. They always use the term like Alpha, Gamma, Beta, Delta type of ranking like military people do, and that basically determines what grid part they are guarding or what sphere of influence they are guarding an opening to their realm. And they're very strange life forms. They're also very crass, sarcastic life forms in some instances, and they're not above practical jokes and pranks either. Like mischievous elementals, they're an elemental species like any other, but they're unique because of this triform relationship, like the Hist. So it's too bad we don't have one of them around to speak to. This would be very appropriate, but they can only come out once every great while. It's like a planetary or rotation cycle. They can come into this realm, or they're in a form of hibernation most of the time. But except for the guards are only in specific places, and they are guarding areas where the rest of them are hibernating, or an entrance to the realm where the rest of them are. They have to maintain this link to that Hist-like relationship. Then they would be more sentient, or they would be more feral, excuse me, like the lizard men in Daggerfall. So, and also regular trees can be portals for different life forms as well. The forest people, dogmen, sometimes will use them. Forest people have been known to pass through trees that have unique doorways. Also, dimensional beings do this. My father, he has a closet door that it's made of different layers of wood. And I went into this room. This is where my grandmother used to have her room there in Mundelein, Illinois. I went and I stayed in there, and I saw this figure on the door. This wood, like almost like it was basically the wood grain pattern that the original sheet of wood had. This looked like just basically like an alien, but with like weird looking like beady eyes in the center. And I came to
Hmm.
find out that as life forms pass through the tree portals, or if these triforms use this as well. It's like with a being that's in a different frequency. All you see is like a white mist or something, and it could be just a person that looks exactly like us, but the frequency is off. Doctor Who did this best by when you see the doctor goes back in time to investigate something, he catches a person that's out of time sync or in a different dimensional state, and regular photographs made it look like well, this lady looked like a ghost when she, in fact, she was human in a different frequency. And he peeled back the layers, and eventually they found out what the person looked like and where they were. But this, as a being passed through the original tree that wood came from, left an imprint and left their dimensional shape in the wood. And sometimes you see faces on trees that people think are the consciousness of the tree. It could be an echo of who passed through that as well. And the triforms act this way as well, where sometimes you'll see this ape-like face or something on the tree. Sometimes forest people can do this, but these triforms usually will bounce from some of these areas where some of these openings are, and many people have misinterpreted them as fairy life forms as well, or where they're bouncing in circles of trees and everything, or stone circles like fairies normally would. Uh, and they've been misconstrued, but they are a green color. Fairies generally go in the purple to sometimes maybe red, but orange and red generally you see the bad guys using, and then you have the fairies that are in the greens and blues and purple realm, and then the triforms are usually mostly green and kind of like a teal light that you see usually, but like a mist. But it's like you see these orbs floating within the center,
Yeah.
like a big amoeba, pretty much. And so at least that's how our eyes would judge it with the lights in the center. Kind of like the lights of Zadar from Star Trek, where you had a whole community where you had the lights all within it. Those guys were bad guys because they were trying to possess someone on the Enterprise, but it's kind of like that, like an amoeba with all the little lights in the center.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's like that's the relationship with how it coincides with the Hist. It's exactly the same in that respect. It's plant based, it's energetic based, and evolutionary and frequency based. So I find it's a dead on match. So that just the story is different, obviously with the life forms, but it's the same story. Uh,
You
so uh,
said, you said something about like the wood grain
mhm,
changing.
mhm,
I've heard from there's a YouTuber who put out a video of his story. He's a Call of Duty YouTuber primarily, but he talked about paranormal stuff in his house when he was a kid in one of his videos back in the day. Really old video. I don't even know if it's still up. Um, but he was talking about how when he was a kid, he had this playroom and he was in there and the closet had like a wood grain in the door and he saw it like change into like a demon,
mm,
and it then explained all these events that were going to take place in his lifetime to him, and he said that none of them have been false, and he told them of like four events that were going to happen,
mm,
and that the two of the events have happened as the thing said it was going to happen, and he doesn't expect the other two to be any different. And he said they were some of the worst things he's ever heard, and he's just kind of terrified about it. And yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, closets are notorious portals for both insectoid and demonic and gray life forms, all of them to come through, and mimicker demons and whatnot. But the thing of it is with that grain that you were saying also, I've seen this in floors, I've seen this in ceilings, like we have like a stucco like ceiling in here, and also
Oh, yeah.
and I've seen that on patterns where faces will emerge from the patterns of beings that are around you. You see it in like the rug carpet, all of these things. I even out near Yuma saw a reptilian face come up out, a large reptilian face come up out of the dirt, where their energy variants or sound waves moved the dirt in such a way to where it took their face form, kind of like sound waves against sand where it takes certain patterns. That's how they were able to show their face. Their frequency moved the sand around, and the wood grain can do that. And I could see where that happened to him as well, because again, the wood was being used as that
Yeah.
doorway. No, it was the closet too. And a multitude of life forms have used wood to come through as a doorway. So sometimes when something like that happens, it's good to burn it. Cabinets, wood cabinets, like you've heard of something called a Dybbuk box. That is or a jinn or a demon is kept inside of a wood containment box. And that's also a mimic of a piece of technology or a quantum box that a demon or ghost or other life form are held within it, like a cage. A jinn, like in Japan, where they show the large jinn in the cages, that's a form of magic that was used by emperors, kings, and wizards. Probably more than likely Omniaji there, but but with an Abe no Seimei's line and barrier magic that was there. But King Solomon did that with his ring, things of that nature. And also aliens sometimes will carry around a little box with a life form in it that helps them harvest energy out of people.
Hmm.
Like the little life form will grab it, and then they have this kind of the symbiotic like deal to share the energy that
Yeah.
they and the genetics they gather, they both get something out of the that part of the abduction sequence. It's not just always genetics, sometimes energy they take through the meridians in the feet or the hands or the head. So that's also very similar to that. I'm going to see who is actually present. I believe it was Elena Vessa that wanted to speak this morning. Or is there an elemental around? I know you guys are part elemental. I understand. All right, but I have a new communication arc for them outside. That's why I'm looking this direction. It's outside sitting on a tree stump, ironically out here. So, yes, okay. Which one of you wishes to speak this morning? Oh, Vessa. All right, all right. Mhm. Hmm. Yeah, see, they in the Serrana genetics, there's some elemental fairy within their genetics, so there is uh, a link to that kind of energy frequency dynamic and variance. So, okay, yes, I'll shut up so you can talk. Okay. Then her and her and Lane are usually quite direct like that. So, mm, okay, through the crystal. Yes, he is correct on all counts with this. Some fairies can do this as well, where either feral or not. This is a relationship he did not describe. There is a type of elemental that is more feral in nature, that they are after all bits of energy, like how pigeons eat seeds if you or bread if you throw it out for them, or birds that eat seed. Not that we're comparing some of these other feral life forms to some of the beauty of birds, but this is essentially the same. There are feral elementals that if you were to throw some energy out there like seeds, they would gather in droves by the thousands after a while, and they would essentially think they had permission to vampire off of people and the surrounding areas of energy, even decimating whole energy deposits and energy frequency abundant areas. Think of them like locusts tearing away at crops. It is very dangerous dealing with them. If you saw them, they would look almost a human-ish, but on all fours, crawling around naked and degenerate. It is very much like the draconian version of the Argonians versus the more civilized version. It's very, very tempting to want to feed and appease them, but think of like a flock of ducks that come back to after informing others that there is food. You will have them by the thousands, and they will decimate the energy of an area. They have been far removed from other elementals, such as fairies, such as even like the triformed and other beings such, and therefore they are more akin to an animal. Essentially, these particular elementals, they are extremely far removed from the elements, ironically enough. and they will continue to vampire off of different areas. He has encountered them himself in his own past, and a friend of his has encountered them and thought it was kind to actually help them out. But think of them as more of an eternal, like, say, crack addict. Let's just put it that way. And also in your Earth Final Conflict lore, where when the Talons are ripped loose from their commonality, they become more Adavan or more vampiric in nature. This is essentially like a Hist, like, but an energetic relationship. But that is the extent of other examples out there. I can go into questions if you like.
Um, I don't have any questions per se. I mean, I would like to understand if sort of the negative groups use a system similar to this to kind of create better quality servants, some
Yes, you
kind of
are actually correct.
corrupting like liquid.
Yes, you are correct. Think of even the adrenochrome trade as such, where the servants are constantly addicted to that because they want to remain young. Or in your Star Trek lore, within your DS9 lore, where you have the Jem'Hadar that are addicted to Ketracel White. It is within their genetics that they must have it, or they're going through eternal withdrawal pains and pangs. So where the Dominion or the Great Link kept them as slaves. That's essentially where, like, the Orions and their reptilian servants. It's essentially like that with the Draco, whereas they are the go-between for the soul energy or the adapter through a nano core in their system. That's why cutting the head off gets rid of that energy and puts it back to its original point of origin via frequency value coupling or entangling back to where that energy is supposed to go, as he has explained multiple times with the frequency game, as he calls it. With different types of servants have to come different types of energies, addictive qualities, etc., etc. People that fall into any form of addiction technically are in, you want to say, in servitude to darkness, but it's a little bit of a nondescript type of thing. It is like this, where you then gain an entanglement to some dark source that has led you to a particular energy by which then they can farm out of you. They call this looshing, but there's also chemicals that are looshed out of people, a multitude of vampiric type of chemical reactions from GMO foods all the way to sugars. Different demons are in that realm, but it's more of a direct servant to master relationship. It is more or less uh, the intaking of a chemical. Your ayahuasca falls under this, unfortunately speaking. Yes, you, with a small amount you can connect to higher realms. A larger amount you actually connect to a majority of the time other spheres of influence. There is a practitioner out there known as Gigi Young that talks about the eighth sphere. They don't really necessarily have numbers, but different worlds within worlds have different, also different holographic levels, like the planes of oblivion have different links with different substances or the abuse thereof. Like, say, your ayahuasca links to the one she calls the eighth sphere, where a lot of attachments and demonic possessions, such as your void dimension, are linked into. You have not necessarily a hell. There isn't really a hell where you go where you die. That's all soul trap nonsense. But the others, such as your cocaine, crack as they call it, and also heroin in large amounts, you then become not only a servant to the withdrawal, but there are certain codes, free and frequency adaptations that are uploaded to your frame that then you become or have the potential to remain a servant to one of the say, call them the Orion or Anunnaki lords out there. In your Earth Final Conflict, there was a Talon that was in it that decided, Mael was his name, and he decided that he was going to eliminate a dangerous plant, that people were dying of a dangerous addiction and they were a slave to the addictive quality itself. There's also a set of life forms called Talarians that wanted to become the essence of addiction. That then the Orions used that particular energy to not only enslave them and degenerate them like what happened with the jinn, but also to infect others, to be able to not only gain that energy from others, but to also enslave them within, say, the structure or building or amusement park or casino that they work within, to constantly channel off of their abundance and karma dump junk onto those particular people. Now, as far as direct servants go, where people bow to them, not only from the chemicals themselves, but the energy, such as worship in and of itself. But drugs themselves, with the connotation that they have or the frequency value that they have, also always, almost every time, it links to these different realms, except in very tiny amounts, like your marijuana or your ayahuasca or any of these. Larger amounts can send them into a feral rage, very much like your mushrooms did for your berserker, you see. So anything in that over excess. Now, even some areas of your CBD fall under this in massive quantities. To a small amount, to, like, say, the Argonians, they had that symbiotic relationship. To a larger amount, or lack thereof, they became feral. You see the relationship? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. What? So do these Triforce beings sort of? Because Chris was talking about them that they were good. I'm getting a different sort of interpretation that they're sort of a midline between good and negative.
You are
From my
actually correct. Your intuition is dead on the mark, Ryan, because they have also, in and of themselves, have learned to serve darkness. You see, with the talk about the servant relationship, that symbiotic relationship. Also, think the abuse of the tri form. The Orions have abused the power of three for many centuries. They were originally the ones that set up the Triform's relationship with the elementals, begin with as an inverted bastardization of nature. Eventually, there were good forms that came out of the Triform life form, but they started out as a degenerated conceptual servant, very much like the Casino Tellurian aliens that I spoke about before, the horse-faced degenerated creatures like that, or the degenerated elemental inverted forms that were more like crack addicts. It's essentially the same difference, but with every good, there's a bad. With every bad, there's a good. So, and also the relationship to the multiverse, where what doesn't happen here happens there, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. So you have the evil forms that were the servants that were genetically created by the the Orions, you see, or the Anunnaki, as you would call them, and some of their even servant. Then you have the good versions, other dimensional versions that nature, other places in the multiverse created in order to balance the system out. You see, so for every good there's an evil, for every evil there's a good. So this is how that took place. This is what you are picking up on.
All right. That ends my questions for this session. Any other messages that you would like to put forward? This is your time.
Yes, yes, this has been great. Though short, this has actually been poignant. This will actually get out to people as to inform of this type, not only this type of life form, but the dangers of turning into a conceptual life form, going from a concept to a sentient life form. Good. Reverting back into a concept, not so good. This, like, you have an angel of this, like protector, or angel of healing, or this, and this. Not only, as he said before, was that someone misinterpreting different crew members on, like, a starship, like a captain, a doctor, a security officer, etc., like protector of a ship, captain of a ship, medical officer, etc., like on Star Trek. But where the Orions wanted servants that were points of worship and aspects of themselves that they were using, linked to that particular servant through their energy harvesting network, mind you, to be routed to them like an adapter or plug in a wall. This, through that particular worship, began to degenerate not only the being into a conceptual form eventually, and basically the breakdown of those energies, but turning them into a monster or an abomination. That's why worship is so very wrong in that way. So this is another thing we're picking up on. This is all I have to say today for this particular program. So I thank you for allowing me to speak today. Thank you. She was showing me via the energy harvester network how things would degrade over time and start to melt into their more conceptual base forms, like breaking a chunk of metal down into its back into its ore components, or unfrying an egg or something like that. It's like essentially like taking an omelet and breaking it back down into the eggs. That's not necessarily completely possible unless you have a philosopher's stone of some kind of like replicator system, like on Star Trek, where they take one component and transmute it into another, or like a lead to gold sort of thing. But it's still, there's a difference between that and something degenerating down into a base feral life form. Like in Doctor Who, there were these in the distant 5 billion years ahead future, you see the David Tennant version of the Doctor going ahead to a new Earth. And you see at the bottom of this like pit, there were these crab-like life forms. He goes, these were empire builders. These were intelligent beings, and now it looks like they've de-evolved. De-evolution falls into this abomination category, is what she was trying to say. Very, very interesting. Just like those elementals I said became kind of like crack addicts. I've encountered these things before. You never want to placate these things. They'll act like you throw energy to them or something, even a small amount. They're going to be like a flock of birds wanting to come in and take it all. I always compare them to like the owls gathering around the dumpsters and stuff in Futurama. It's kind of like that. Uh, not that they want to degenerate the position of birds, because birds are actually more in a better or sacred position, but it's kind of a similar concept. I think this is good where we can leave it. Ryan, do you have anything else to add?
No, I don't. Thank you for your time, everybody. This has been a good show. Sorry, it's
Yeah,
been a bit short traveling soon, so
yeah, yeah, he's traveling across Europe. So yeah, so as of tomorrow, from the time of this recording, we're recording on 5/22/23. Thank everybody for watching this episode, albeit short. So thank everybody. Have a good one. Bye bye now.
bye.